Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project after a little bit of organizational chaos. I'm often involved in a certain degree of organizational chaos. Tonight was a little bit more than usual. But anyway, I am joined this evening by Nick Palazzo, who's joining us from the script room. Dave, unfortunately, couldn't make it this evening. He just got his COVID vaccine and is suffering some of the side effects this evening, so he couldn't be with us here tonight. But we'll try to carry on without him, because tonight this is season 5, episode 28, or session 28, in which we discuss episode 6 of the season. So we're moving up to episode 6, which is a very action-packed episode, especially contrasted with, I know, Nick, we've been dealing with some of the very non-action-packed episodes of the front half of the season, and we're making up for lost time on that front.
Yep. I think I started out with my my intro to the script discussion for this episode with, I cannot tell you how excited I am today to actually have a story in every one of our plot lines.
Right, in which things happen. There's like, I think we have fight scenes in all 3 plot lines, don't we? I mean, there's like, not just action. There's just events. There's like combat in every single one. So yes, very high tension episode here today. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I wanted to apologize at the beginning. We've had the backstage session on GoToWebinar, which many people have attending. I screwed that up and I had to create a new one, and then compounded that by forgetting to send that out. So for those of you who are watching on other places, who often watch with us backstage on GoToWebinar, you can go to the discussion forums and Nick can set you up there with the link for the new session. So feel free to join us there, or continue to join us on YouTube or Twitch or Facebook or Twitter or any of the other places where we are also streaming. So anyway, let me move on to announcements for the evening, and then we will jump back into the episode. So 2 announcements. One, I just wanted to, this is the first Silmarillion film project session that we've had since the big news hit, but I did want to repeat the big news for those who haven't heard it yet. We are doing Mythmoot in person this year. We are doing a fully hybrid Mythmoot this year. We're gonna do an in-person gathering in Virginia, and we are also doing a fully digital event. So that is gonna be a lot of fun to do. I cannot wait to get to see folks again in Virginia, in Leesburg, Virginia, at the National Conference Center, and to be able to get together with folks online as well. So Mythmoot is June 24th to 27th, and really looking forward to getting back together. I know that the pandemic is not officially over, but it's gonna sure start feeling much more over to me once we are actually able to get back together for Mythmoot. So that's gonna be a whole lot of fun. So we don't yet have the registration links up for that yet. We're still finalizing a couple things, but those should go up in the next couple days. But we wanted people to be able to be thinking about it and planning for it, and working out what to do here. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew about that. And then also Signum clubs. We are now running live with our clubs. Our first clubs are happening. It has been awesome. We've got students doing creative writing together. We've got students learning Old English together. I keep getting corrected by my philologist colleagues who say that my teachers who taught me that the language was Anglo-Saxon were all like dinosaurs, which is, remembering my teachers couldn't be more likely. But anyway, so Old English, they're learning Old English. They're reading The Hobbit together. It's been a lot of fun. So we've got our book clubs, our creative writing clubs, our conversation clubs for immersive language conversation. In foreign languages, in modern languages, and then translation club for learning historical languages. Been a really wonderful time. So I encourage folks to look into that, signumuniversity.org/academy. All right. Now back to Film business. So the first thing we wanted to emphasize here is we wanted to be looking ahead. As you will have noticed, we're doing things a little bit differently. This, we sort of structured this season, our productions a little differently this year, just as we were kind of interspersing continued discussion on basic concepts while we were going through and doing the episodes and stuff. Similarly, we are going to be starting the post-production stuff also sort of sooner. We're going to kind of be interweaving that. So we would love to start discussing some things like casting nominations and voting, sets, locations, and props, creative and artistic listener contributions, the music and score. I just want to very strongly invite folks to send in some stuff. Of course, we can't discuss what we don't have. So we would love to get some more contributions. To just encourage folks to send in some ideas and thoughts. There are several different forums in the discussion forum where you can participate in those discussions, get some ideas, give some ideas, and then we'll be happy to discuss and go through some of your ideas and suggestions during the broadcast when we get to those. So definitely wanted to encourage folks for their creative contributions. We have loved those discussions and looking through the wonderful stuff that folks have created in previous seasons. And the film script discussions continue on Sunday, the 18th of April. So that's a week and a half from now. You guys are going to be discussing episode 11. Wow, you're really getting up there. You're
Yep.
In the home stretch there.
Absolutely.
So almost that's the last pre-battle episode, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's the big push episode.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Fingolfin's big push.
Yep.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, that's a huge episode for setting up the final duel of Fingolfin there at the end. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really big stuff. Awesome. So there's a link there to the discussion forum where you can go. Tell them how to navigate to it from the forum. So if they go to the Film forum, then where do they go from there?
All right. So you go to the Film forums, and then you go down to script. That'll take you to a list of the seasons. So season 5. And then you would go to Script Discussion, Season 5, Episode 11. It's in the notation SO5E11, which is the way that we've been doing that for a while. Very often, like right now, the last post in there is on the forums at all, at least in the script forums, is the Episode 11 sub-forum, so it's easy enough to find right now.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Awesome. So encourage people to get involved there. You can show up for the live session at 7:30 p.m. on April 18th, or you can post there in the discussion forums thoughts and ideas about that episode, which will then be taken into account during the script discussion. So let us get to the outline of episode 6. So we're working off an outline here. The episode's called Freedom, right? The working title is called Freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is the jailbreak episode. So we've been kind of building up to this for a while. This kind of builds off the concept that we discussed back in season 4, which was that we wanted to, it was one of the things that we've been exploring now for a while, since like halfway through season 4, was the issue of elves being taken captive in Angband and what happens with them, right? So we wanted to explore one of the 4, or each, I should say, of the kind of 4 different outcomes for elves who are taken captive in Angband. We wanted one who is taken captive and never escapes. We want one who is taken captive and legitimately escapes and achieves freedom. We wanted one who is taken captive and who is mind whammied into becoming essentially a collaborator with Sauron and Morgoth, and then one who is sort of more subtly mind whammied into betraying their kin when they get out. Picking up on, I mean, it's like, one paragraph in the Silmarillion. I've been doing my annual reread of the Silmarillion recently, and just this past week, got through the entire content of season 5 in the 2 or 3 chapters there. But I was paying particular attention again as I went, that one paragraph that talks about the situation, about the problems of of those who that those who escaped faced, because they faced so much suspicion, because often there had been serious problems when they when they appeared to escape. So the faked escapes and everything else, and the ways in which Morgoth was using this to sow distrust among the elves. So we wanted to explore all of those different options. And this one now, so we have 3 of those 4 characters involved, right? One of them is already dead. So we already had one of them. One of them was featured last season, which was Evelos, the wife of Angrod. And she was the one who got mind whammied into becoming an active collaborator. And we have our other 3 main prisoner characters, Diriel, who is the wife of Curufin, right? Am I remembering that correctly? The wife of Curufin, right? Yeah, and she's the one who's prisoner and not going to get out. And then we had Annael, the Grey Elf, the Sindar, who is he's famous. His primary role in the text is that he's that sort of loner Grey Elf who will take in Tuor eventually, and kind of become Tuor's, well, not exactly foster dad, but he's going to shelter him right after his escape. Mm-hmm. In Dorloman. So that's what he's going to be famous for down the road. Yeah, exactly. His foster father. So we decided to make him the one who is going to also be the unwitting agent of Morgoth. And then, of course, Rogrin is the candidate that we decided for the one who actually escapes. So Rogrin's escape is the primary plot of today, and he's going to escape with Annael, and that's going to be cool. So that's our central thing, and it's connected with the C plot, which is the introduction of the character of Hador. So we have young Hador. Hador is what, 17 or something like that in this episode?
Probably maturity, so it's between 17 and 20 probably. Yeah.
Right, so he is a strapping, adventurous young lad who is heading out and has been recruited by Fingon, and he's going to serve with the elves, and he's going to end up assisting in the escape and thereby earning his reputation among Fingon and the elves of Hithlum. And then between those, in the B plot, we have Haleth and the Haladin settling in Brethil. Remember, we finished episode 5 with Haleth and the Haladin emerging from Nandan Gortheb, traumatized and bloodied as they come out from the horrible experience of going through Nandan Gortheb and meeting Shelob and her siblings. And then, of course, she then moved on to the distinct pleasure of meeting Thingol in his first field trip in quite some time. So that's where we finished episode 5, and they're going to be the B plot. I'm sort of wondering, Nick, I'm thinking about sequence. Should we talk about the A plot and the C plot sort of sequentially and then come back to the B plot at the end? What do you think?
I would be totally fine with that. Yeah, that sounds perfectly fine to me.
I was just thinking, just given that the two, to kind of, that way we might be able to do, on the offhand chance we don't get to all 3 of them tonight, that way at least we can kind of do the whole arc of the of the Rogrin escape story here tonight. And then if we need to come back to finish up the story with Haleth next time, we can. All right. Okay, so A-plot. So Nick, tell us about some of the larger kind of conceptual issues here as you guys were thinking through this. What were some of the both sort of positives and negatives, like some of the the positive things that you were wanting to do, that you were thinking about, that you felt were really important to accomplish in this storyline, and some of the things that you were kind of like concerned about or wanting to make sure to avoid.
Right. So there's a few things. The largest problems, I think, involved when we were going to get Hador involved towards the end of the plot. But also, we did a lot of thinking about what Diriel's role in this is.
Right.
Because we wanted a situation where she would have a certain level of plausible deniability. As kind of, we set her up as kind of the liaison between the elvish prisoners, and the Forest of Angband. And so, in order to give her that plausible deniability, she basically hands over the escape planning and execution to Rogrin.
Right.
She's not going to be personally involved. Rogrin's going to handle the whole thing, so that if she's asked, which I don't know anything about any escape plans. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. I'm trying to remember where exactly we left her. I remembered that she was sort of, kind of, Morgoth has kind of made her into the, the four-person, four-elf of the prisoners, right? I mean, she's sort of in charge.
Right.
What was he? I think I'm blanking on some of the details, because he had some leverage on her, didn't he, to kind of force her into this role?
So she witnessed the original emplacement of the spell of Bottomless Dread on Edelas.
Right.
And she saw that happen and was like, yep, no, no. So to avoid that, not only for herself, but also to protect the other people around here, she made the decision, the unilateral decision, like, okay, we're better off doing work for them and serving them of our own free will, rather than getting our brains exploded from the inside.
Right. Right. So she's decided to. So hers is it's basically a utilitarian decision. I mean, this is a really interesting question, right? Because again, this is just a wonderful example of the kind of thing that gets just mentioned in like a sentence in the Silmarillion. And there's obviously, like, if you were kind of on the ground, right, there would be this whole story behind it that we never get and kind of have to imagine. Because we're told that there are Noldor who are working for Morgoth, not only like in his mines, but, forging things for his servants. Like, how does that come about? How do they, how does he get them to work for them? Because it's not like, he can hold them prisoner, right? But, can he force them to work? How does he force them to work exactly? And how does that work? So trying to kind of get inside that and try to understand the position of someone who is, and Diriel was a very strong character in season 4. I mean, she was the leader of she was the one who was trying to arrange escape attempts and things. She was sort of taking care of folks and masterminding the whole thing until Morgoth. And this was while Morgoth was gone, right? When he was off, seducing the fathers of humans. And she was there, with the other prisoners, with only Sauron in charge, and they were trying to escape. And then all of a sudden Morgoth comes back and lays the spell of Bottomless Dread on Edelas. And I remembered that she was basically kind of standing between Morgoth and the rest of the elves, and he basically gave her the choice, right, to say, like, either I'm gonna I'm going to do this to every single one of you, or you're going to either do this willingly or you're going to do this by force in the way that I just showed you that I could do, right? Isn't that pretty much how it worked?
Yeah. They can serve her willingly, or they can choose the way of pain, right?
Exactly. Something like that.
And of course, like as in many things, I'm cribbing in a lot of ways here. I'm heavily inspired here by The Great Escape, and kind of there's this sort of gentleman's agreement in The Great Escape between the commandant of the camp and between the senior British officer that eliminates that officer's ability to be involved in the escape attempt, because he has to be able to be true to his word when talking to this other gentleman, right? And so he appoints someone big X, right, to run the escape attempt, and in our case that's Rogrin.
Right. And of course, there are a couple interesting factors here, which are sort of parallel, right? On the one hand, she will abide by her word, right? Like, she can be trusted, right? So, that is a thing that Morgoth knows well enough how to exploit, right? And of course, the answer to the one question which obviously could be asked here, right, is why would Morgoth do this? Like, why wouldn't he just put the whammy on them? Like, wouldn't that be better? But the answer is no, because he knows that the value of having Noldor slaves is to have them using their sub-creative powers, right? And if they are merely mindless slaves, if they are merely extensions of him, then he's not going to get, then he's not going to get the work out of them, the quality of work out of them, because they can do amazing things.
And Steve H points out that there's a physical cost to him. I don't know how much he'd have to expend to on each individual elf, but most assuredly, if they have thousands of these guys, I mean, presumably he's like putting a ton of his power out into the orc population and like a whole bunch of other stuff too. So
his whole R&D department. Yeah, I mean, exactly. There's a lot of ways in which Morgoth is expending his power and himself. But I do think it's interesting, Stephen. I do think it's an interesting point that there would be a calculation on Morgoth's part, I think, still. And I say still because there's going to come a point where he's going to be so far gone that I think he's not even making this kind of calculation so much anymore. But I think he's not there yet. And I think that now he still would want to economize, essentially, to sort of, because he knows it takes a lot out of him. Again, as you say, Nick, it's not like it takes so much per elf that he can't do it or, would be loath to do it at need. But yeah, if you can avoid it, why not? And again, and as I say, there's also a benefit. Then they're using instead of just being his tools, instead of just kind of channeling his power, they can be using their own very considerable power in order to be bringing about, great things. So, by the way, that reminds me, Nick, are we going to come to a point, it seems like we should, right, when somebody, what are they doing? Mining, right? But they're not just mining. Right? They're also forging and things like somebody, right? Somebody has got to find, like, one of the elves, like, see on an orc or somebody, one of the captains of the orcs or something made by one of the Noldor, right? To recognize that as Noldor work.
We've actually been discussing this for a while, the potential of maybe somebody coming across a helmet with Diriel's name inside it, where she had actually signed her name to let people know that she's still alive.
Right.
So if
I would think she would do that. Yeah.
So that we haven't had chance. I don't think we're going to have even a chance to do that this season, because the end of the battle scene that we're up against is so, like, it's going to be so tight.
Yeah.
But finding a chance to do that during season 6, if somebody even came who doesn't know who Diriel is, like one of Barahir's companions come across as Diriel, who's that, and throws it over his shoulder.
Well, right? I would, I'm wondering,
is that a little too MCU?
One of the things that I'm thinking about where we could possibly deploy this, it would be a delay, but playing the long game is what we do, right? As part of the lead up to the Near Ninth Ornoidiad, I'm thinking, kind of in that contribute, not exactly the same plot line, but like to or parallel to or kind of going along with somebody like Gwyndor's motivations, right? Gwyndor, like, they're holding my brother, for somebody to, that, and remember, like, this comes from Maedhros, right? Maedhros is the mover of the, so we've got this major Feanorian, it is the major Feanorian offensive. So, like, what if one of the things that kind of happens through there is the discovery that they are there, even that Diriel herself is there, and I could see that coming in as a kind of a subplot leading up to that. Yeah. Anyway,
so basically, the way that we engineered for the escape to begin, because we needed Diriel to be on screen right away, we needed Rogrin to be on screen right away, to set them up as kind of the co-protagonists of that plot line, right? And so Diriel gets news from one of the miners that, hey, we think we're getting pretty close to one of the exit tunnels, right? Those secret exit tunnels in and out of Thangorodrim. Because presumably, if they were just getting closer and closer to the surface, that would get discovered, right? Like, that's obvious.
Yeah,
but you have to do some pretty deep math to figure out, like, we're getting suspiciously close to one of these other tunnels. Right. And so she just drops by Rogrin's shop and is like, hey, so here's this piece of information that you might find interesting.
Right. And I don't want to know anything further about it. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then she leaves, essentially, leaving him to now follow up on this.
Okay, so Rogrin. So how many total elves are escaping here?
We were envisioning something on the order of 24, not like a tremendous amount, but enough that it's
a substantive breakout. Yeah,
and it's enough that having them deal with, like, a patrol of orcs on their way out isn't unreasonable. Nobody's going to think that that's crazy that they fought their way through to get out of the to escape from the mountain itself.
Right.
Which does happen. They wind up miscalculating a patrol. This is our the third act turn, right?
Right.
So if you were watching Deep Space Nine, right, you get to this point in that, and you're like, oh, okay, they're going to be okay because we're not at the end of the episode, right?
right. There's still 20 minutes to go, so it's good.
I remember this conversation very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this raises an alarm, right? And so Diriel now has to act, and so she engages in diversion, completely unrelated, right? Something just happens, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me, a big vat of molten steel gets dropped off of its thing, or
could happen to anybody.
There's all kinds of things that can happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
there are no giant, still mostly molten gold statues, obviously, but it's enough to give Rogrin and the other escapees the breathing room they need to make their escape. And of course, they run into a new factor that they have not encountered before, and nobody has really encountered them before, and that being war riders out on the field of Argallan, which I think would cross the streams with the sea plot there. So do you have so maybe we should back up to anything else that you want to talk about as far as the escape itself?
What are we, so how are we handling the kind of dynamics between Rhogrin and Annael? Like, what are we doing with Annael's character leading up to there? Has there been any tampering with him? Is the audience suspicious of him at all? Is there any reason to be suspicious of him?
The audience should not be suspicious of him. We're going to reveal that he's a mole, but not until, I think it might be episode 8. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's either the next. It's within the next 3 episodes. 2 to 3 episodes. So, but he is one of Rogrin's trusted guys. They were captured together,
right? And
Rogrin's like a big, tough, soldiery guy. One imagines that his cell gets tossed like every other day,
right?
You know, and he, so he's been kind of like siphoning off weapons and whatnot to be used in a future escape attempt, and Annael's kind of been like sitting on his stash for him, right? Because Annael is, you know, like, I wouldn't use the word dweeb, but in comparison to Rogrin,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Annael has been he's been kind of clueless from the beginning. I mean, we first met him going on the picnic with his family in Ardgallan, but like on the battlefront, right? Not really, you know, being aware of his surroundings.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean that's been his, you know, the impression we've had of him from the start. But you know, hapless, little hopeless, but you know, looked after by Rogrin. So he's the kind of, I don't know, he's gonna be the sort of weaker, younger brother figure to Rogrin,
but plucky,
right?
Yeah,
right. And certainly seasoned by, you know, one would think seasoned by this horrible experience. So, you know, we will see him as certainly as he's, you know, fighting alongside Rogrin and fighting their way out, a very different guy than the guy who was picnicking with his family when we first met him back before.
And we wanted to make sure that we showed, because the level of distrust that we see in the Silmarillion towards people who escape from Angband moving forward is so intense that we wanted to show how deep that betrayal must have felt, and to do that we want to make sure that Annael is deep in their councils, right? He is involved in this escape attempt. He becomes one of Fingolfin's trusted ministers in some way. Later on, he's present at critical meetings, and we're going to show just how dangerous this is. You know, this wasn't just some rando that we're getting here. This is somebody who is whose intelligence is going to matter.
Right, exactly. And as you say, because we want to paint the picture. I mean, again, although we only get that one paragraph on it in the Silmarillion, it paints a really dark and bleak picture of the kind of the life of paranoia and you know, people who are families, you know, who have like their long lost, you know, family members escaping against all odds out of Angband, only to return home and to be like chased off, you know, and refused entry into their own homes by their families, because their families are so concerned that they've been turned by Morgoth and are going to be. I mean, that's a really, you know, it's a pretty big effect, right? It's a huge effect. So this has to be something that does, I agree, have to be very salient. And the first one already was, right? Ethelos was bad enough, though in some ways that one was a little.
Well, we knew
that. Well, that yes,
we didn't get to feel that betrayal.
Exactly.
Whereas in this case, we will.
Right. You know? And the other thing that I was wondering. Because I'm not remembering how the kind of denouement from this went. Did everybody know? I mean, Angrod knew, right? So, I mean, with that horrible moment when Angrod knew that Ethelos had betrayed them, did everybody know?
No.
Yeah,
no,
so that wasn't really that public. I mean, it was, right. But it wasn't it was in the middle of the battle and nobody knew what happened, right?
Right. And so... we're getting to feel this betrayal alongside the elves. This is kind of the same thing as, when Ethelos was captured originally,
right.
and
right.
when Sauron's with her, we get to experience that betrayal along with her,
right.
so that her future actions feel more visceral.
Right. But yeah, with Ethelos, it was a big deal. I mean, obviously what happened with Ethelos was a huge deal, and a huge deal for the experience of the viewers and their understanding of the situation with Morgoth. But as I say, not as far as like the cultural impact on the elves of Beleriand broadly, so much. So it is another reason why this one has to be really, this needs to be a doozy, and to create that kind of paranoia. That's going to support that and make that happen. Okay, cool. So, right, before we get to the Warg Riders, let's jump to the sea plot here. Okay, so we have back to the Edain. So, Nick, you guys decided to do something different about Estelad, right?
Yeah, so we took a little bit of inspiration from like a Viking thing where it's something that happens every few years.
And the old thing, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there are cultural practices that are engaged in during this gathering, including a coming of age kind of rite that the young men go through. People are engaged in trade. You're getting news from the other encampments and whatnot. So this is the encampment, right? Like everybody lives. They have this kind of nomadic herding lifestyle that they're engaged in normally, and then every few years they get together for a month or something like that to have the Estelad.
Yeah, right? I really like this a lot, actually. I think this really accomplishes a lot of fun things. First of all, I do really enjoy that parallel. But one of the dangers of Estelad, just as like a stable city, of the Edain there, is that it creates the situation where you have... where it feels like they're all in one enclave, like they're all gathered together in one enclave behind their walls, which is, I mean, it's not a horrible effect. Like, you can definitely work with that. But if they're out ranging around, like if normally they're out ranging around, it renders more urgent the question of how do you interact with your neighbors, right? And it picks up on what we've already done with the Green Elves, right? And they've already had an issue with neighbors, right? With elvish neighbors and their herds and stuff like that, right? So we know that there's reason to think that this is going to be an issue. So if they are more geographically spread and even wandering around, it's obviously going to be an important question. It's going to be it is a more obviously crucial issue. Like this is a problem that must be solved, an issue that must be faced. Like, how are they going to be connected? What are the elves going to do about this? How are they going to relate to the elves? It's not just, whereas again, if they're all just gathered in one comparatively small city surrounded by massive plains with which is like, where Estelad is on the map, right? If I just go back here for a second to the map, so like Estelad, I mean, there's a lot of open space around here, right? I mean, there's Doriath, of course, and Nine Elmoth, but I mean, there's no like I mean, look how far away they are from Hellevorn, right? Look how far away they are from Himring. I mean, it's so yeah. So if we're picturing like a little walled city of humans here minding its own business and staying behind its walls, it looks like it's a non-issue, right? But if they're roaming all over the place and they're spreading out over the, all these lands and then only gathering together. So that's one thing that I like about it, is that it makes, when we're gonna, be getting together to have the Estelad, as we say, and I like how we've shifted that now. When we have the Estelad later on, it's going to be more obvious why this should be an issue and why it's. But right. The other thing I like about it is I do like what it does with that now, and I like that sense of, by building up the gathering so that the council, when the council happens, doesn't seem weird, right? Like it's like. Right. We've already established this is a kind of thing that happens. It's just they're going to have a more important one than usual because they will come to a place where they've decided they have to make some decisions about what they're doing.
Exactly. And one thing that we're doing here is like future, like Middle Earth historians and archaeologists would call this the Estelad culture, right? So it's still the Estelad people, right?
Right. Right. But it's still the people of Estelad. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Right. Which is fun. I enjoyed that. So one of the things that we're doing here, something that, and we kind of took inspiration from certain Gallic rituals that I think Caesar writes about them in the Conquest of Gaul, and where the young men go through this ordeal, right, where they have to like make their way through like this thorny thicket and and do like martial exercises inside this thicket to show that they are that they're able to move around quickly and acrobatically and whatnot, because obviously we've all heard stories about Celts running naked into battle,
right,
which sounds like a terrible idea.
It really does. It always has sounded like a terrible idea.
But this is based on this, and because they're herders, and of course the idea that the people of the Estelad are kind of like cowboys in this way didn't occur to me until maybe a week or two ago. But they are a horse culture, right? Which is why when we see them on horseback later on, it's not that weird, right? And we know that they are a horse culture when they're living in Dorloman, right? So it makes sense that they already were that, right? And so there's a horse race involved. There is spear throwing involved, all kinds of good stuff. One of the things that we did, and this is again inspired by the video that I told you about with Tom Shippey. I don't know if you got a chance to check it out yet, but like one of the young men gets like super injured, right? Like I forget exactly what we had happen to him, but like it like gets a huge thorn like through his hand or something like that, and everybody laughs because that's hilarious, right?
Right. Yeah.
But Hador doesn't win, and so his expectations of what life was going to be like when he was an adult are not met.
Okay. So we're starting off with a talented, high promise, but slightly disappointed Hador, basically.
Yes.
And comparatively, at least by his standards, underachieving.
Right. We wanted to give him a reason why he goes and completely he goes off and follows this elf lore, because we had to do this very quickly. We didn't have enough. If we had a whole episode with Hador, we could have done some other things with him, but I feel like we had to do this super fast.
Right. But I think I can see the logic there, right? He's imagining himself, establishing himself as like future leader of the people, right? And now, like, but he's not coming. So, but he expects to win, and by winning, establishing himself in that way, right? But he doesn't win. He's come in second, and now, so he's not looking anymore forward to a future of like obvious leadership, and now he's imagining being shunted to the side. But here's this other chance to prove himself, and his future here is less bright than he thought it was, and so might as well. Yeah,
and he doesn't
that makes sense.
Be different,
right?
Like it's like somebody graduating high school, right? Like something happened, right? Something's different. You're expected to act differently. You're not going to this place anymore every day, but you don't feel any different. You're still the same person, and so it's a very weird kind of experience, and we wanted Hador to have that experience as well. So Fingon, who's been studying them, right? He's been studying the humans of Estelad for a while, and he has kind of come to the conclusion that the best use for them is to put them right at the front. Right? If he can get them right in the front, they will get the opportunities to live out their lives while contributing.
And by right at the front, you mean up in the north, right? He wants to bring them up north. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. We gave him this insight that nobody really has kind of latched onto yet. That they have to act in the time that they have, or their lives just disappear.
Right. I wonder if we could even have. I mean, I don't know. It might be awkward to work into dialogue or whatever. But I'm just thinking of the elf human perspective questions that we've been discussing recently again, and imagining Fingon standing there watching this coming of age ritual, right? 18-year-olds coming of age, right? And like what his perspective on that would be. Like, 18? Are you kidding me? Like, what? No, he's not in diapers anymore, but seriously, like barely out of diapers. And yet, so to see him kind of processing, things are different. Like they're Hador is really young from elf standards. He's still a child, and yet he would process. Like, not only is he an adult now, but I mean, the path from here to like being past fighting age is not that far, right? By the time humans get to the, I'm imagining him like also talking to one of the other human leaders or something, like a 60-year-old guy, for instance, right? And elves come of age at around 50, right? So he's sort of talking to this guy whom he would consider like, okay, now this guy's an adult, but he's retiring, right? And he would be saying like, yes, like the 60-year-old guy would be like, yes, I'm not as fast as I used to be. Like, my fighting days are behind me. And, just to see, I mean, Fingon, and that would be hard, right? That would be really to understand like the window, right, that humans have for this kind of action.
Well, that's one of the things that we've been working on with Fingon, is that he has a unique insight in these humans because he's been observing them now for 100 years or so. He's just been studying them. We're Fingon the anthropologist, right? And so he's been watching them, so he knows all this stuff at this point. Right. And we've been working him towards a lot of these realizations along the way as well, especially like with the death of Beor and whatnot.
Yeah, I was thinking about the death of Beor.
So he tries to recruit a bunch of these guys to go, and Hador jumps at the opportunity, right? Like, one would imagine that Hador, had he been in Tennessee when Daniel Boone was looking for people to go into Kentucky, he'd be like, yep, that sounds, yep, that's, I'm in, right. So they set off. Because of time constraints, we did kind of have to bunny sled them up north a little bit, but we established at the beginning of the episode during the conversation between Diriel and Rogrim what the time span of the episode is. So I'm not super worried about that.
Right. Because again, from the elf standpoint, it can be fairly slow moving. You know, the the escape is imminent. It could be imminent a year and a half in advance.
Exactly.
So yeah. Okay. So question: what is Hador's status in his band of 30 to 40? Is he a leader among them? Is he not? Is the guy who beat him with them, or did he stay?
No.
He stayed.
He stays behind. And in fact, I think we actually do use him during the council.
Yeah,
during the council.
Right.
If I remember, I may be just remembering an idea that we came up with, but I think that's.
Well, no, that would make some good sense. I mean, having established him as essentially a rival of Hador, to be able to take advantage of that later on makes sense.
Thorn Hand comes with him though, so that he is a recognizable person that we can.
Right, we have human companion in arms of Hador, so we can establish Hador's relationship with his companions through that person, as well as his relationship with Fingon. Right. Yeah, sure.
So these guys probably are mostly relatively disaffected. I'm not saying like these are the outcasts of the culture or anything like that, but they life isn't what they thought it was going to be. They're no one ever told them life was going to be this way, right? So they're going to they go with Fingon, and Fingon takes them up to the outpost, right? That was originally the newly rebuilt outpost that had been burned down by Glaurung back in back in the previous
season. The one that got sacked by Glaurung on the plane, right?
Okay. Right. And
so they've not yet seen like the glory and splendor of the homes of the Noldor yet.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It would have been nice to do something like that, but we don't have time. And Fingon feels the pressure of time on these guys also. So he's been traveling with like a lieutenant this whole time, and so they get up to this location, and his lieutenant's like, all right, so like what are we gonna do with these guys? Things like, well, not me, you. You're in charge of them. I have prince things to do.
Right.
Enjoy.
Right.
Because we had to get Fingon out of there.
Right.
He can't be there for these guys to shine. That's not
Right. Okay. Now I have a couple questions. So first, I meant to ask this before, but I forgot. Horse culture, you said.
Yes.
I am assuming that we're going to have a significant difference in horses between their horse. So, like, are we thinking something like, the Noldor are, like the horses of the Theonorians, which were then given to Fingon as well, are like, large Arabian quarter horse types, and the people are riding like Icelandic ponies, basically? Something
in that neighborhood, right? Like one would imagine that the Noldor, specifically Celegorm's running around with a big division of heavy cavalry, right? Everybody's got one of those, presumably. Finrod probably has one. Fingolfin has one and whatnot, but they're not in comparison. The size of Celegorm, because all of Celegorm's guys are heavy horse.
Right.
This is definitely a light horse group, right? Yes. This is our light cavalry.
Light cavalry, skirmishing kind of. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. These guys are not driving headlong into pike squares. That is not a thing that's going to happen.
No,
here.
definitely not. But yeah, and also, I mean, it would seem also to fit. I mean, I'm kind of imagining the scene with the elf commander, right? Who is not only going to, I mean, he might literally not know what to do with, like tactically not know what to do with them, right? I mean, like it's like what use are they gonna be, right? These, practically unarmed, you know, guys riding these tiny little shaggy horses
Yeah.
who, you know, like what on earth are we going to be able to accomplish? Like, how am I supposed to deploy them even? Like what's going to happen here?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah. And like, obviously these guys don't come with their own armor.
Right.
You know, they may have 2 or 3 swords among them.
Right.
You know, everybody else is carrying
and
the
they're going to
spears
be ridiculously crude in comparison to anything the Noldor are making.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, now we've been establishing that these men are engaged in trade with other cultures. At this point, there's probably some metallurgy going on. You know, there's maybe a couple of smiths among the people of Estalad.
Right.
But they're a nomadic culture.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're not stopping to build an entire forge setup and whatnot. Right. We're talking about small portable forges and bloomeries to get your steel going. So,
and presumably they could trade with the dwarves for stuff.
Yes.
I would imagine the dwarves would probably value, meat from their herds, right, would be a commodity that the dwarves would be interested in. So I'm sure they can get some dwarf stuff. But yeah, I mean, but sure. But these guys, right? I mean, this is the JV squad anyway of the humans, right? I mean, they're like just of age. So, you know, yeah, we're not talking about I mean, they've not been doing much trade with the dwarves.
No. You know, and so they're up there at this outpost, and they get word that they've been finding wolf tracks around, like large amounts of wolf tracks, and Hador seizes the opportunity. Right, he goes up to the officer who's been put in charge of this. Like, hey, why don't my guys go out and take a look and see what's going on? And the guy's like,
hunting wolves, that they can do, right? This is. Yeah, they have experience.
Knock
with this.
yourself out, kid. Right. I have grown-up things I got to do here.
Right.
And so Hador goes off in search of the wolves, which turn out to be the warg riders who have beset Rogrin and his companions, his escapees. So we get to, in the denouement, go to Brethil. Hador gets the Dragon Helm. Whatchamacallit, Annael is reunited with his family, which is great. And Fingolfin is also there, because we wanted to show Fingolfin, because this isn't just a win for Hador, it's also a win for Fingon.
Right.
Because this is his baby, right? The whole project is his baby.
Yeah. So this is a justification of the entire concept of let's recruit the humans to come. Like they really do have something to offer.
Right.
Look what they can accomplish even under these circumstances when they are underarmed and untrained, in the ways of elvish warfare. And yeah,
absolutely. It was important for us, due to something that we had going on with the frame story, which we may or may not get into, for there to be behind every man of action, behind every person of action, there is a person of words behind the scenes, ensuring that things work out.
Right.
So while it's great that Hador pulled off this upset,
right,
without Fingon, none of that happens.
Right. That makes sense. Now, tell me more about. First off, tell me more about the warg riders. So this is a new thing, right? We've had the wolves before, and the wolves many times. In fact, like most notably, we've had Celegorm against the wolves way back at the very beginning. We've had, of course, most notably the wolves playing an enormous role in sacking the Falas, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So this is the very first time that we're introduced to warg riders. It's a small group, It's not a tremendous amount of them. Rogrin has a couple of dozen people with him. They probably lose a couple to the patrols as they're escaping. But there's enough of these warg riders where Rogrin and his guys on foot can't handle them.
Right.
Not because the orcs, right? But because the wolves.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. They're too mobile, too fast moving, and they can't possibly escape. I mean, that would be the clearest thing, right? Would be that escape is hopeless.
Right.
Between the speed of the wolves and the ability to track them, like there's no hope of, no matter what they do, they could not possibly get away from these guys. So I like that element of it. Are these going to be the riders, the warg riders? Are they going to be like a new? One of the things
like
I'm
a
new breed of orc kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Like, is this going to be an opportunity where we're going to be showing, like, deliberate diversification of the orcs? Because the orcs have been relatively uniform until this point.
I had not thought of that in this case. I know that I had been thinking that when Sauron becomes the Dark Lord, that's something that he does all the time, right? I don't see reason why it couldn't happen here. But if we wanted to maintain that as an innovation of Dark Lord Sauron, that's certainly something we could do as well.
Okay, yeah. So that was leading me to my next question about them, which is who's their boss? They serve under Bulldog and therefore under Gothmog, or are they? I mean, because like orcs have been primarily Gothmog, and Bulldog, and wolves have been primarily Sauron. So how do we? And not that we have to explain it, but like, how are we imagining this?
So what I am imagining is that Sauron is trying to integrate the people working under him with the main military forces of Angband. And we may have to. I've been thinking a lot about this and trying to figure out ways to have it come up in dialogue, so at least some mention of this is made.
Right.
So it's not too weird. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty dedicated viewer to be asking this question. I imagine.
Right? Yeah.
But I want this to be a show that's made for that kind of viewer too.
That rewards dedicated viewers. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
We want.
It's interesting, just for our purposes, to think about where this fits into Sauron's story arc. Really, right? I mean, because he's one of the tensions that we've shown. I mean, we've sort of established him as for a while ago established him as the cunning plotter, while Gothmog is the blunt instrument. But we were also showing in season 4 that he was questioning even. The question is beginning to arise: is Morgoth less subtle than Sauron? Right? That Sauron himself is because we were beginning to plant the very beginnings of that, right? Of his doubts about Morgoth. And so I'm trying to think now. On the one hand, he is continuing his. The primary thing that we've shown this season has been the failed orc assault, right? That led to with the Haladin, right, at the stockade.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
And so what we established at the end there, that was, if I'm remembering correctly, that was the last bad guy scene that we had on screen. Right. And so we last saw Sauron mocking, the orcs who were on, Bulldog, for his failed plan
Mm.
to invade, and therefore, his Sauron's critique of Gothmog for his poor planning, and in what he not only failed to accomplish, but how the whole thing sort of backfired on him. So if he's now like, I can imagine reasons why Sauron might be kind of playing with the team in a different way, right? Or to a different extent now. Do we see this as him trying to move in on the operations, right? Getting his people kind of on the inside, like making himself more essential so that he can supplant Gothmog as primary, general of the forces kind of deal?
So I think an easy way to set something like that up, because I think that's a good, solid idea, is to have, and we'd have to kind of like backfill this into the episode 4, but to have during that conversation that you're mentioning, having it end with Sauron say, you know what? I'm going to throw you a bone.
Right.
I'm going to send you some help.
Right. Right.
And he looks over to the side, and Rhogrin comes out of the shadows into the frame, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that will, so I feel like that would be enough to support what we're seeing here, where it's not
right.
Like, it's understandable what's going on here.
Right. Exactly. And it would show that this was not a capitulation by Sauron, but part of a plan. We don't have to spell what the plan is, right? But just to show that this is the next stage. And of course, to me, that fits really, really well, because of course, one of the things that he was critiquing was just how ridiculously ham-handed the stockade assault was. Like, let's send in a bunch of, orc infantry behind enemy lines to make them stir up trouble, which is only going to serve to, solidify the connections among our enemies, and has almost no chance of accomplishing anything significant anyhow, especially given that they were invading right behind the lines of the elves with all the cavalry, right? So like, one band, as we saw, right? One band of Theonorians on horseback, can just like mop the floor with this group of orcs on foot. So look, if you want a roving band of orcs who's going to stir up some trouble and cause difficulties, right? Then let's do it this way, right? This is obviously the plan. So, and especially again, since we did last see, the orcs resoundingly defeated there because they had no cavalry and were helpless against cavalry. That would be logical here as well.
Yeah. Now, in this situation, the orcs are themselves outnumbered, which is a little weird for them, right? Like, wait a minute, how could this possibly happen? But I mean, hey, humans, we make more of ourselves.
Right.
So this is going to be very, very different from when we see masked warg riders during the Dagger Bragalak. Like, that's going to be a very, very different animal. And you can kind of just imagine, and I can, if Kelgorm and Curfin with heavy cavalry are like have just broken through a formation of infantry, so that they're not actually mobile and they get hit at that point with a charge from Warbright, like, that's devastating. No, that'll be really fun ways to deploy that, because as you said, we are going to have to show the defeat of the Theonorian cavalry, and it has to happen not only by dragon, right? So it has to be more than just a dragon and Balrog problem. Now, the Warg Riders, are they, I mean, I assume that the Warg Riders are themselves relatively light infantry, right? I mean, these are not going to be really heavily armed. It's just a scout group.
Right. It's a scout group. So how are we imagining them armed and armored? They have, what do they have? Missile weapons? Are they throwing things? Are they using bows? What are they doing? the orcs?
So I would say that at the point at which we see them, they're really toying with the elves, right?
Because they know they can't escape, and
Right.
yeah,
Right. So
they will
even if
even
they
be able to
have
see their
bows,
escaped
we may
prisoners.
not. Right. Even if they have bows, we may not be showing them using them because, it's not gonna. It's not as fun, right?
Right. So showing them actually like riding in circles around them and taunting them yeah. No, just this would be play for them. About how many of the orcs?
I would say there's probably between 20 to 30 of them.
Okay.
Like enough that 20 underarmed and possibly underarmed and overworked elves aren't going to be able to
On
do
foot,
what they would normally do.
Right, exactly. In rags, mostly without real weapons, like holding mining tools and things like that. Like, so yes, like Noldor in rags holding a shovel, right, is what they're fighting against. So yeah. Okay. So all right. So they're going and but they would and so they would have what? They would have swords. They would
yeah.
Okay.
Swords, spears, axes.
Would their intent be to recapture them, or?
I feel like if this is a roving band of orcs, they might not even intend to recapture them.
Right. They would just kill for sport first and ask questions about what they should have done second. Yeah. It's actually not a bad moment to sort of emphasize the
cruelty
of the orcs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is not just the orders that they're operating under. This is just who they are. Yeah, so I think that is a good opportunity for that. Okay. And good. Now, so when Hador and his men get there, they are about equal in numbers to the orcs?
I would actually think that because they were also not super heavily armed and whatnot. Right. I would say that they probably outnumber them. Because they have to put them to flight, right? They can't have like a big throwdown with these guys.
Right.
I mean, the mere fact that other cavalry shows up, is a big plus. But having it, because having them outnumber the orcs shows how big of a game changer the arrival of humans is.
Right. Okay, so you're imagining then not actually a really big fight, just sort of a charge, and they drive them off?
Essentially, yeah. The heavier part of the scene is the lead up to it, right? And then Hador and his guys show up. There's a fight, but we don't want to linger on the fight too much. Like, again, we're getting into the last, this happens within the last 10 minutes of the episode, I think.
Right.
If memory serves. So, yeah.
I am picturing, maybe it's because of the Viking stuff that you were talking about earlier, but I'm totally imagining them throwing hand axes at the orcs now.
I'm fine with that.
That's kind of the image that's in my head of like the orcs riding around and taunting, and then all of a sudden, axe wielding and hurling humans on shaggy little horses come charging in.
They're herders too, right? Like it wouldn't be unthinkable for there to be a lasso or two involved too. Like that would be awesome to just they get a lasso on an orc and just drag him right off of his ward.
Right. Yep. No, exactly. They're herders, and that like wolves are. the natural enemy of like herd animals. So like hunting wolves, they're used to that, and their horses would be used to that too. So even though these wolves will be something more than they're used to, it's still kind of a day at the office as far as they're concerned. Not so much the orcs, but so this would definitely be kind of playing to their strengths, and that would be fun to show. How do we have? I assume obviously Rogrin is going to pitch in when they show up. So I mean, is he going to be leading a counterattack too? What kind of interaction between Rogrin and Hador are we imagining here in the?
Well, Rogrin's. This is the first time Rogrin's ever seeing humans, right?
So he's going to be all kinds of confused.
Yeah.
Right. I was not without hope that we might be suddenly rescued, but that was not what I was expecting.
Right.
Yeah.
And Hador can deliver some sort of almost like a boastful introduction, like like wind in his hair,
right?
From what's it called, Dances with Wolves, right? Like I am Hador, whatever, and but in a language that Rogrin can't understand, right?
Right. Right.
So I think it would be actually if they can't if Hador is literally speaking a language that Rogrin can't understand, I feel like that makes the interaction even better because
yes, even more perfect, more perfectly capturing the moment there.
Right. Because Hador is a great warrior, and having even Rogrin, who we know as a great warrior, look up to him from being on the ground with respect, I think that would be great. I think that would
and we've sort of
we have to fall in love with Hador as a war leader,
right?
Immediately,
right. And by the way, we skipped over this before, but we have like reestablished Rogrin's like immensely formidable prowess, right? So because one of the things that I'm thinking, again, long game, I'm with Rogrin, I'm always thinking about his final charge, right, in the fall of Gondolin. And so we can totally not foreshadow that, but like when they come upon the unexpected orc patrol in the tunnels, right? Obviously what has to happen is Rogrin leads an apparently suicidal charge with his huge hammer right into the teeth of these well-armed orcs, and bowls his way through and takes them all out in ways which are going to be very parallel to what he's going to end up doing in Gondolin, right?
Yeah, Stephen H would be very unhappy with me. I think if I did not mention the scene at the end of Rogue One where Darth Vader shows up in the corridor and does just that, and I think that having Rogrin do a scene like that on his way out, and didn't we cast the Punisher?
We did. We absolutely did. In my favorite piece of casting in all of Film, yes, we did.
I mean, to me, it's a close second to Tulkas played by The Rock. I mean,
that's also pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Just the thought of Tulkas doing the eyebrow thing that The Rock does.
Yep. Take my money. Make the show and take my money. Anyway.
But I mean, I love the opportunity to establish that, which not only makes his, because, with the parallels, right, with the goblins, the orcs closing in on Gondolin and everything, and the desperate escape attempt, right? I mean, it's, it will make that moment so much more poignant, to have these parallels, and not only having seen him do exactly this before under apparently worse potential circumstances and succeed, right, to have both the sort of the wistful memory of triumphs past, and also like the desperate hope that maybe it will actually work, right? Making, his ultimate destruction even more sad and tragic. Anyway, so obviously need to make sure we do that. So it'll be like Darth Vader in Rogue One, except not fighting guys who are like cowering behind walls.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, I'm sort of imagining Rogrin as the bowling ball and the orcs as the pins, right? As he goes through there. Yeah, no, cool. Okay, so Rogrin now, piling in on the side, meets and certainly, respects Hador. And I love the idea that like the two of them can't communicate at all, right? But like both of them would clearly respect one another,
right? Yeah.
Immediately and without words at the end of that battle. Would Annael be somebody? So there should be. I mean, like we established with Finrod. Finrod, of course, had the whole like telepathy going on, which is cheating. But I mean, not cheating by us, cheating by by Finrod. But there's the business about the similarity with the languages and stuff. Like I'm imagining like maybe Annael or somebody being able to like parse together a word or two, a broken word or two to be able to try to communicate something.
Well, we don't come back to them for another scene until they get to Brethil. Mm-hmm. So there's not a tremendous amount of time.
Opportunity. Okay. All right.
Right.
Just wondering.
And once they get to Brethil, Fingon's there and he speaks the language. Right. So we're
okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just kind of picturing Annael, and I think I was also kind of picturing your Annael as man of words behind man of action there as well as the other thing I was thinking of. But
yes,
but that's fine. I understand the economies of the scene.
Yeah, for Rogrin, the person of words is Diriel. Right. Without her, none of that happens. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And so now tell me about the Dragon Helm kind of ceremony. So they come back, right? So the next scene we get is them arriving at Brethil, and they're arriving with the prisoners, and there is delight at the return of Rogrin, especially, and that, by the way, would also be. I mean, talk about ways to win over the hearts of the soldiery of the Noldor up there. Like you rescued their captain, from holy cow. I mean, that's his ticket right there.
Right. So one of the things that well, obviously having Annael reunited with his family was super important. His son is Fingon's herald at this point, so he's right there, and and that's great. Having Fingolfin, showing pride in his son, in addition, because it's working, right? The lesson that he learned from Beor is working,
right.
And this again, both Fingon and Fingolfin are learning stuff from humans that's allowing all this to take place.
Right. I really like that dynamic of it, by the way. I think that's a really, really smart thing to be doing. It is so easy to imagine the humans as always the younger brothers, right? Always they're the ones being elevated. They're the ones being brought up. They're the ones being taught by the elves. And I really love the way in which we've really deliberately worked in that, there are many things that the elves are learning from the humans.
And I'll tell you, it's really interesting about this season because I have always found the humans in the Of Men chapter of the Silmarillion to be extremely forgettable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I remember Hador, and of course you remember Beor and Haleth and whatnot.
Yes.
But as cultures, it's very easy to kind of
Yes.
forget about them because the stories aren't about them.
Right.
You know, yes, all the great tales ultimately are about human characters or partially human characters and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But when the humans got on the scene in our story, I found that they were a lot more relatable
Right.
than I thought they were.
Right. Right.
Because they're us. Like, their struggles are our struggles. Yeah,
Right.
we're removed by those kinds of struggles by 1,000 years or so.
Right.
But it's way easier to understand what they're going through than it is for us when we're looking at the elves. And I've enjoyed working through their stories this season so much, in ways that I didn't realize was going to happen.
Yeah, it is really neat. And one of the side effects of that, which I think is really, really cool, since season 2, the elves have been the characters that our viewers have related to, right? You know, it was the Valar in season 1, and then we sort of, shifted the focus to the elves in season 2. And so, like, they, our viewers are used to relating to the elves and connecting to the elves and thinking about, and now all of a sudden these characters they've been relating to for 3 seasons already now seem strange, right? Now seem weird. Like, it's like recontextualizing all of that to kind of realize how, how strange, how alien the elves actually were. And I love that. I love the way in which it gives a fresh perspective. Like, yes, those the characters that the elf characters that you came to like over the last season 3, they're still the same people, right? And you can still like them in the same way. But it just kind of a reminder, they're still elves after all.
Yeah. And I have found myself like getting emotional thinking about the human characters in these stories. When I think about Haleth at the stockade, when I think about Beor and his death and him passing his skills and his abilities on to the next generation, and when I think about Hador, who is probably the best warrior in his group, right? And then he goes to Estelad and he's second best. Right. And when that happened, I felt it so hard because, like, the big fish in the small pond syndrome sets in. It's like, oh, that's what's happening here, and it's like, oh man, I recognize that. I know what that feels like.
Right. And the way that sets up the, I love the kind of parallel to that. Like, now, like, going to be, a kid warrior among the elves.
He's the last starfighter.
Right. Well, it's like, basically, I mean, he's going to be like really second best. Like, he came up second best. Now he's going to be, while having him in that parallel position where he's like, again, they're like the junior varsity squad. Yet, like, he proves himself, right? So the way in which it comes around, and the size of the victory compared to the size of the crushing loss, at the beginning of the episode, and the way that it puts all that into context, I think those parallels are really nice.
Right. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed Hador's story, which is amazing because I remember Hador's name and that's it.
Right. Yeah. Well,
when I'm thinking about the Silmarillion.
To me, this is the big reward of this project, right? I mean, there are so many people who just get mentioned. And to be honest, like, even some of the major characters, right? I think it's one of the things that really you notice when we're doing this, right? When we're talking about these characters and we're thinking about this, not everything about all of them, but even the major characters in the Silmarillion are still largely left to our own imagination, right? A lot of the things that Silmarillion readers love about particular characters are things that they've added to it through their own imaginations, right? What they love about it is that Tolkien has created these characters and these stories that are so evocative that you invest yourself in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the character, in some ways, I think with many of these characters, with many of like the character that you love, there's very little of it in the text itself. It evokes it in the reader, and that's a very powerful thing, and that's it's a very effective thing. But again, we don't actually get to know them very well. We know very little about them. We're kind of there are a whole bunch of small evocative details that we're given, which but we do a lot of fleshing out ourselves. So just kind of continuing that process and doing more of that, I think is really really fun. And
I do love that Hador's story is essentially like an 80s teen action movie, right? like it follows all the beats the whole way up, right?
Right.
And it's just like he having fun with these characters has been also extremely rewarding. Like teasing at Twilight in the Haleth episode was so much fun. So it's
cool.
It's been great.
Well, we have a little bit of time. Let's look at the B plot at least. Maybe we won't finish it, but we can at least look at it. So the B plot is sandwiched in between these, right? We have the escape plot is the A plot. So we're with Rogrin, and it's Rogrin's kind of the point of view character, right? Primarily.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're following Rogrin. And then of course we've got Hador and their two stories meeting as we've described. Oh wait, I forgot. Hang on. So Fingon is going to give him the Dragon Helm.
Yes. Yeah.
And what does that like mean to Hador and to Fingon when that transfer happens?
So to Fingon, and it's funny, I actually went back to try to listen to the session where we talked about this, because I remember us talking about like what Fingon says to him here, and I can't remember what it was. But conceptually, Fingon is saying to Hador and men in more generally,
right?
Like, you have a place here. You have a role to play in this story, and I recognize that you need to be playing it now, right? Not someday,
right?
Not when you're ready,
right?
Not when I figure out what to do with you.
Right.
I figured it out. Right. You have a place in the story today.
Right.
Right. Because the story of the Dragon Helm is important, and it's an important part of their story. Fingon received the Dragon Helm because of his encounter with Glaurung, which symbolically, of course, is Fingon is preparing men to face Glaurung,
right?
To face the enemy he failed to kill,
right?
We don't know that yet, obviously, but that is happening here,
right? Yeah, we're working our way towards Turin there with the Dragon Helm. Yeah,
way down the road.
The road. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. To Hador, it's a vindication that he is worth it,
right?
That he's grown up, right? Because that was the feeling that he was left with at the end of his rite of passage, was that, I did the thing that I was supposed to do. Feel different. Right. I feel like I should feel different.
Right. Well, and the other thing, and this is what I was kind of focusing on earlier when I was talking about like their gear and their horses and everything, that when they get among the elves, they're gonna feel inadequate, right? I mean, they're gonna feel, like bumpkins, not they know their own worth, right? And yet it's going to be clear that they are not up to the standard of the elvish. Like, they're not going to need uncertain glances from the elf commander of the outpost to tell them that, nobody knows what to do with them and nobody really respects them up there, with a possible exception of Fingon, but especially once Fingon leaves. So having seeing and feeling that he has now earned a place among the elves and earned the respect of the elves. So we've got, Fingon respecting him and giving him the Dragon Helm, and Rogrin there. And again, with Rogrin on his side, the rest of the soldiers are, he's going to be a hero among the soldiers of Hithlum because of his rescue of Rogrin. So that sort of, not only for him personally, the kind of growing up and I've arrived thing, but also the I am a peer of elf lords now. I really do fit here. That's a pretty big deal for him to feel that way. Not just, and again, I'm thinking especially ahead towards Hador in the council, right? It's not just the elves are great and it's fun being their pets, right? That's not his line, right? We can work with them and they're willing to work with us and they will respect us. We can earn the respect of the elves. I have the respect of the elves, and we can operate with them as equals. I would think that's got to be one of the things that comes up at the council, right? That the anti-elf faction is going to be what are they going to take us in as their pets, or are they going to, are we going to be like their herd animals? They obviously are not going to respect us. They don't treat us as equals, and there will be Hador there to say, actually, yeah, that's exactly what they will do, what they can do, what I have already found. So cool. Neat. Okay. So sorry, back to the B pot. I was just realized I was skipping over the Dragon Helm there. Back to the B pot. So we last left Haleth and the Haladin staggering out of Nandun Gortheb with a rather surprised Thingol and Beleg looking on. Right.
Right.
So we start here. The B pot starts with the meeting, right? The meeting of when Haleth and Thingol meet face to face. So tell me more. How does that go?
So one thing I was thinking of is, we talked a lot about the fact that that Thingol's obviously significantly taller than she is. She's tall for a Haladin woman,
right?
But Thingol's the tallest person ever.
Right. He's like 7.5 feet tall at least, right? Yeah.
Right. And so when she, I was thinking today it might be interesting that if she were to say, I won't talk up to somebody sitting astride a horse, and so he gets down off his horse and he's still towering over here. Right.
He's barely any shorter. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, she's like, okay, well
never mind. Yeah.
Right.
Hang on, I'm going to get on a horse. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Let me get a box.
Let me get a box. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. But basically, Thingol's going to tell her, look, what you guys did, I don't know how you did it. Beleg's going to express admiration, which Thingol can agree with, right?
More coolly, but he will agree, right?
Right. And he tells them, look, you can stay here, rest up here in Dimbar, regain your strength for when you move on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right. That's his stance.
Right.
He's not a total jerk to them where they're clearly hurting. He's not going to just send them packing immediately.
Move along. Right. You can't
stay here. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But he will make it clear. Yes. I'm not inviting you to live here. Keep in mind. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is a temporary easement.
Exactly. Right? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
But as he's walking away from that, Beleg's like, hey, so I have an idea. We've been having this problem in Brethil, mm-hmm. and maybe we can solve one problem with another and win a victory for the Southerners.
Right. So, question about Beleg here. So, the one stumbling block. This was the one stumbling block I had in the outline here. The one thing that gave me pause was Beleg basically kind of throwing them to the cats, right? Like it's, or let me just state what I was concerned by, like worrying that it's going to look, basically Beleg could look a little bit like a jerk here, or at least fairly cold-blooded, right? I mean, Beleg's a great guy. So I'd like to think, right, that his first impulse would be like, oh my gosh, like, how can we help you? Right? Yeah. Not like, oh, hey, like newly traumatized and bloodied people. Let's like have you attack an enemy that we don't want to attack. Right. Like, to solve up, you know, that just, it seemed a little heartless, right. For him to put. So I'm wondering the way that it would seem to me to most easily kind of get around this problem would be to have Beleg not originate the idea, but Haleth originate the idea. Like basically, I don't know if the conversation would have to flow like this, but if it basically kind of went like this, where Haleth, you know, they say, hey, great, you guys can rest here, but you can't stay. And have Haleth being essentially like, you know, where, is there anywhere that we can go? You know, she can say even like sarcastically, like, is there anywhere that you would permit us to stay? And Beleg could be like, well, on the one hand, there's the Forest of Brethil, but on the other hand, we have this giant cat problem there, right? So you're not going to want anything to do with the Forest of Brethil, I assume, on account of the giant cat problem. And Haleth then being like, whatever, giant cat problem. We'll take it. We'll take it as is, right? And so it becomes like a boast by her, which she then fulfills, which seems like a very Haleth thing. That way, Beleg can go along with it, right? But it's not like he's like, hey, let's force them to hunt the foes that we can't even handle, right? But he would, and also he would support them, right? So he would be. Anyway, that's just one suggestion for maybe mitigating that issue.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that we definitely wanted to have come out of the scene is with Thingol kind of handing responsibility for this over to Beleg. We want to get Thingol out of there anyway. He's been on holiday from the Thousand Caves long enough.
He's come to the end of his leash, definitely.
Yeah. So having him. You know, the problem we ran into is that we left him there at the end of the last episode. When we got here, we were like, wait a minute. He can't just be home at the beginning of the episode. That's going to be weird. Like, we're already having a little bit of bunny sledding going on here. I feel like this would stretch that to the breaking point, and I'm not okay with it. So, but, yeah, so as far as Beleg starting out offering help, like, you know, how can we help you? I feel like that's the right move anyway, to start the conversation.
What if the Brethil thing, so Thingol's gonna say no, right? I mean, if they say, like, because Brethil is in his domain, and so if they ask for permission so I'm thinking we can use that to mitigate. So they have their first meeting, and he's like, Thingol is like, okay, right there, that's like kind of impressive, let them stay, but I still don't want them, you know, move them along as soon as it's plausible to move them along, right? And then he leaves the situation to Beleg. So if the Brethil thing emerges from Beleg, right? He doesn't have Thingol's blessing on this, but then Haleth, you know, because he's not giving it to them, right? He's not saying like, I bestow upon you the Forest of Brethil. He's just saying, well, there's a perfectly nice forest down here with this one exception, except for there are these giant cats. And Haleth says, we'll take it. And we'll slay the cats, and then we will dwell there. And Beleg, he'd be kind of caught, right? Because Haleth, when she says she's ready to go, Like she's going to be like, and I
Yeah.
shall now go and defeat the cats,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so Beleg is like, oh, but I don't actually have authority to. But okay, let's go fight Tevildo, I guess,
Yeah.
is what's happening now, right? So he's caught. So when he doesn't present this to Thingol until it's done. Right, so he goes back to Thingol and he's like, so, okay, here's the story. On the one hand, the humans want to live in the Forest of Brethil. On the other hand, they just killed Tevildo and, and wiped out the cats. So I'm thinking, this could work out. And that's when Thingol says, well, okay, fine. But you have to make them promise to, guard the crossings of Teglin and, Teglin, whatever. Does that seem like that would kind of work out?
Yeah.
I kind of love putting Beleg into this really awkward situation. That sounds fun.
Yeah. So we can have Thingol so what we could do is have Thingol walking away, Beleg saying, like, where do you want them to go?
Right.
And Thingol saying, I don't really care where they go, but they can't stay here. Right. Which is
almost permission.
Almost.
Right. And then so Beleg would come back and be like, I'm sure this isn't what you actually meant, but.
So we don't have a scene where he actually talks to Thingol, but if he's relaying the information to Haleth, which that's the scene that's really important.
Right.
We get all the we can kind of fill in the blanks as to how that conversation went down,
right?
Because what I definitely don't want to do is have Beleg go and have a conversation with Thingol and then go and relay the results of that conversation with Haleth. That just seems
right.
Foolish.
But one way in which we could, I think, maybe convey. So I just had one very small idea here. What if when Beleg shows up again at the end to relay the words, Mablung is with him, right?
Yeah.
So that we have kind of like Thingol's authority there without Thingol himself, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And that way Mablung can kind of channel Thingol's reactions, right? Yes. And kind of, represent that.
Yes. And we haven't seen Mablung in a while,
right?
So that's fine. That's fine. So
that also reminds folks, like, see, look, Beleg went back, and now he's, he came back again, and that's why Mablung is with him now.
Yeah. So I can imagine this scene where Haleth says, finds out about the cat problem, like, that doesn't sound like a problem to me.
Right.
We'll go take care of that. And then she just turns and walks.
Right.
And Beleg's like, wait, hang on, and has to walk to catch up with her, right?
Right. And she acts not only, sort of swiftly in that, but acts as if a deal has been struck, right?
Right.
Okay. So we slay the cats, then it's our place.
Then
it's our land, right?
You clearly can't hold on to it anyway.
Exactly. It's a deal.
King is he who can
who can defend his own. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So she goes into forest.
Oh, how much fun would it be to have her say some kind of paraphrase of that line? That would be hilarious, actually. Yeah.
I'm sure that something along those lines can be arranged. So they go into the forest, and for all appearances, to us, she just goes in with her closest people. They're going in giant cat hunting. How could this possibly end badly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that came out of this discussion was how early humans, are willing is a very strong word, have a level of acceptable losses involved in hunting.
Right.
Which elves do not have. Right. Like, you can't imagine elves hunting mammoths, for example.
Right.
Like, that's super. Why would you even do that? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, you kill one mammoth with 50 people and 5 of them die.
Right.
Like, how is that okay?
Right.
How are you okay
Right.
with that?
Right.
Right.
Yet another
so
little
this-
glimpse into the different perspective towards death that humans
Right.
and elves have.
Right. They live with it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, does it make a huge difference whether they die now or 50 years from now?
Exactly.
It makes some, but
Sure.
it's not.
Sure, but not the same difference as it makes for the elves.
Right.
Yeah.
So they get ambushed by Tevildo, who is toying with them, right? What Tevildo doesn't know is that they have made themselves bait,
Right.
which is something the elves would never do.
Right.
Except in a very desperate situation. We had something like this happen during the season finale of season 4, but that was with Glauron.
With Glauron,
like,
right.
that's a very different
Right.
situation.
That's when the mammoth comes to you. Right.
Yeah. Like, that's not right. That's not a normal hunting practice for elves.
No.
And they had a clear route of escape. They didn't intentionally make it look like they had walked into an ambush.
Right.
So they get ambushed by Tevildo and his cats. Haleth's spear is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The big spear, the important spear.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
So that therefore gives the clear cue to the audience that it's all up for Haleth, right?
Yes.
The staff of her authority is broken. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But she's going to turn our expectations on their heads, right? Because not just her Amazons are here, but all of her people, not all, but like most of her people are here. And they lay into these cats with bows. Some of them get close enough to actually, to use spears and whatnot. And Haleth catches Tevildo unawares with what's left of her spear and kills him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like she's going to continue to. She's not going to rehalf the spear, right? She's going to carry this spear like an ichwat, right? Like the like those short-handled spears they use in Africa.
Right.
I think it would be great for her to have. Now she has a not only a signature weapon, but a distinct signature weapon.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. I love that. Yeah. What's Beleg doing? What's Beleg? So Beleg is along, right, and presumably all kinds of alarmed.
Right. So we wanted him to play a role. So like during the first onrush, he pushes her out of the way so that she doesn't get immediately mauled, right? Because we wanted him to play a role, and David asked for something like that. So we're always willing to accommodate most of the time. So we wanted to show that he's not helping them, right. But
he's fighting hand to hand. Beleg is.
In this situation, there's not much choice, right?
Right.
knives
Cats would
out.
be difficult to.
Yeah.
Bow hunting cats would be very difficult.
Right, and he's probably aware of the ambush like a split second before it happens.
Right.
Which is why he's able to act to at least save Haleth from immediate death. Right. And he's aware of the plan too, right? So like he's not completely, he's in the know. But you probably see a moment of slight panic, like, "Oh, this was a terrible idea," right?
Right. Yeah. Or even like, "This is going exactly as badly as I thought it would," kind of. Yeah. And by the way,
people are going to be killed.
Yeah.
Like some of her Amazons are going to get killed in this.
Right. And this is actually, this is something we shouldn't overlook with Beleg. Like, Beleg is willing to. He is very likely to die, and he's got to know he's very likely to die.
Yeah.
And yet, like, his own sense of responsibility for the situation would be such that he would be going along with them, even no. So I think that Haleth herself might not fully understand, because she knows so little of Elvish culture, might not fully understand what a big deal that was,
Right.
But I think the viewer should have some sense, like,
Yeah.
this is kind of, he was willing to, really thought he was going to die, at that point.
Yeah.
He's really putting himself on the limb for them.
And if we have Mablung there in the final scene, having him say something to that effect,
right?
Aside to Bellic, having him say, like, you nearly gave your life for these people.
Yes.
I really hope that it's worth it to you.
Right.
Which prefigures Turin, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, and that's the other thing that I was kind of building towards as well, establishing Beleg, just as we're looking at just as we're kind of working towards Turin in with Hador up north, also working towards Turin down here with Beleg. It's actually interesting how Turin is like this sort of submerged motif throughout this entire episode, right?
Yeah. I really like that.
That's fun.
And having Beleg say something to the effect of, like, they would do no less for each other.
Right.
Like, they are willing to risk their own lives just to help sustain their family members even.
Yeah. And he would, I think, comment about the fact that, this is a great benefit to Doriath. Like, they could ask for no better guardians on this frontier. Like, this is gonna be a really, really good. Beleg will be, Mablung, I assume, once again, would be tending to have this first time encounter from elf to human kind of like, whoa, these rather unimpressive, primitive persons. I'm underwhelmed, but Beleg would, of course, have a much clearer perspective. Of course, he'd be underwhelmed until he saw, like the hide of Tevildo. Does she wear it, by the way?
I think
the pelt of Tevildo.
I think that we did well, so we could actually use that to help show that time has passed during the time in between the ambush scene and the wrap up, is if she's wearing it Hercules style, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was picturing. Yeah. I almost have to think she would totally do that, right? How would she? The only other thing that she would do would be to have it, up if it were too big, right? If that she would instead have it like as a banner, or like up on the on her house or something like that. But it would be cooler to have her wear it. She doesn't have to like have his head over her head as a hood or something like that. But her to be wearing Tevildo's pelt as a cape, especially since Tevildo is a character we've seen for several seasons now, right? He's not been like an enormous character in the show, but he's been a recurring character in the show. And to have this character wearing his pelt is kind of hardcore, in a very Haladin kind of hardcore,
It could still, that pelt could still be around when Turin shows up.
Yeah.
So when Turin shows up, right, like, nobody's using them, but the pelt and the
spear
are there. They're present.
Oh, right? Man. And wouldn't it serve to make Brondir look more ridiculous? Right. I like the kind of contrast, because Brondir would be the one who would have inherited the pelt. Right. But he would look dumb in the pelt. He would look like a poser in the pelt. It'd be. Yeah.
So we've talked about Andreth going to Brethil to retire, right, at the end of her days, and she receives not Andoril. What's the actual Narsil? She receives Narsil from Finrod, right? So at the time when Turin is there, getting ready to go off to fight Glaurung, Narsil and Haleth's monster killing spear are present. And like I just have this this isn't a scene in the show, but like I have this in my imagination where the black sword is there sitting right next to Narsil. And the monster killing spear, and he goes, "Nah, I'm going with this one."
right. Or like Turin looking at Narsil and being like, "Well, I could use this as a backup sword. It'd be like my second best sword."
I do want to maintain the suspiciously significant thing that every weapon that kills a dragon is black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I've been obsessed with that for years, but that's right up there with cool. David saying of Goliath's sword, give it to me. There is none like it. And I'm like, wait, why? That's important. I need to know why.
Exactly. Tell me more about Goliath's sword. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, that's cool. Of course, we've got to work on that with Encalgon the Black, but I assume I assume you have a plan for Earendel and a black weapon, right?
Yep, absolutely. The bowsprit made of
yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. Anyway, all right. So there's more that we can maybe wrap up, but we're getting late. So we'll kind of we'll come back and we'll tidy up the end of this sequence, and then we'll maybe we can talk about the frame for a little bit, and then we'll move on next time. So we didn't quite finish, but we actually got a little further than I expected to. So our next session, session number 29, I almost said 59, but it's season 5, 29, will be on Thursday, April 22nd at 10 p.m. We will finish up the last of the B plot, and then a little bit. The frame is only the 2 scenes, so the frame is quite short. And we've already addressed it a little bit, actually, thematically, anyhow. But anyway, so we'll touch on those things briefly, and then we'll go on and discuss the culture of the Edain a little bit more, thinking about, especially as we go to try to do a little bit of more world building, thinking about in more detail what does the human culture inside Nargothrond look like? What does it look like in Ladros? What does it look like up in Dorloman? Right? How are we showing those kinds? The sort of the changes and the progress and things like that. So anyway, it'll be interesting to kind of flesh that out in a little bit more detail, so that we can kind of picture things a little bit more fully as we move into the second half of the season. Then thereafter. So awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.